As I was getting ready for this window card hit me right on there. And it hurts. Oh God. Hi, welcome to another week of Theater Obsessed with me, Amy. Yeah, just remember that Black Lives Matter and Stop Asian Hate this week. Also every week for every day for the rest of our lives. Let's just not. So this week is about, I just remembered Jonathan Groff's birthday was last Friday, March 26th, and thinking about him, I'm just remembering all the things that I have done in the name of Jonathan Groff, which is stupid, and it's just things that happened. So we're going to talk about them because obsessions are ridiculous and you end up doing crazy things. You end up doing things that you just, in your brain, they're fine at the time, and then you're like, wait, this is strange. So let's get into some of these stories. So I was first introduced to Jonathan Groff through a little show called Spring Awakening. That show came out when I was in college, and I was a broke, poor college, I mean, this is one and the same, but I was a college student who wasn't doing a lot of traveling. I lived in California. And I was going to school, and I just wasn't going to Broadway at the time. It was, I'd just taken that big college trip when I was 19, so at that time I wasn't going every year yet. So Spring Awakening came out, and it was a huge hit on Broadway. They were everywhere. They were on television shows, there were Gap ads, they were doing stuff that I'd only seen, when Rent came out. So it was like the new hot musical, and these are the stars of this musical. And Jonathan Groff was obviously playing the lead role of Melchior Gabor, and I took one listen to that cast recording, and I watched one bootleg, and that was the end of it. That was the beginning of that obsession. So I'd seen him after Spring Awakening. I didn't get to see him in Spring Awakening. He was done by that time. The first time I ever got to see him live was at a show called The Singing Forest, which was playing at the Public in 2009, also featuring Queer as Folk's Randy Harrison. I was thinking, 2-for-1 deal, let's go to New York. So that weekend I went to New York to go see The Singing Forest, and Hair had opened that year as well. He had played the role of Claude previously in The Park the year before, and then Gavin Creel was playing it on Broadway, and I had seen the Defying Inequality video where they were just belting their faces off, and I thought, yeah, I should go that weekend to go see it. So that's what I did. I just took a weekend trip to go see The Singing Forest and go see Hair, and that was the greatest weekend of my life. So following that, I started following Jonathan's career. I started following the other things that he ended up doing after Hair. I know he did Death Trap in London. Also, he started to be in Glee because Lea Michele was on it, so why not? So I had started following Glee because of Spring Awakening and heard it was a big musical theater show, so there I was, on to Glee, which ended up being a very teen kid heavy show. I was in my mid-20s at that point, so I feel like I was a little out of their demographic, but I was still in it because I was a big musical theater nerd. So that being said, there was one day where there was this, I wouldn't call it a casting call. I think it was just like one of those advertisements that they put out on the internet that said, "Just for the record, I have been trying all week to find this notice because I had saved it. But it is 5 days later and I still cannot find it." So I have this very inaccurate summary of what that filming notice had said. If you're a big fan of Glee, come down here at this time. Don't bring your phone. Don't bring anything. And you'll be part, I don't know if it said you'll be part of, I think I still have it. You'll be part of the season 1 finale, or you'll get to see part of the something. It had something to do with the finale of season 1. And I absolutely knew that he was going to be there. I don't know how. It was in the middle of the week and nobody was going to take off to go see that show with me, so I brought my mom. So it was at Beverly Hills. I think it was at the Saban Theater later, where they'd hold all the Paley Fests at that time. We parked in this like really, I don't know, I know we parked next door to the Saban, and it was a, you know, kind of, it was an office building, so it didn't, the only thing it said about parking was that it existed there. So we parked there, and as you know, with television shows, they don't just last like, hey, 1 hour you're seeing this thing and you're done. It's more like 15 hours you're seeing this thing and they're barely done, but you probably have to leave. I mean, it was completely voluntary, right? But the reason I'd stayed is because the Vocal Adrenaline, the group that Jonathan was in the show, was going to be performing Bohemian Rhapsody. And when we first walked in there, they were just starting, you know, they seat you, whatever. We were upstairs, and then they did their portion of, I think it was the finals, right? So it was not regionals. I don't remember what it was called, but they Vocal Adrenaline was on stage almost the entire time, like hours on end, and they just kept doing Bohemian Rhapsody over and over and over again, which was fine with me. It's Jonathan Groff. I'm gonna stay. That being said, there was a part where to entertain all the fans at that point, different cast members started coming upstairs to do the really short Q&As. So we got, you know, Chris and Leah and Jonathan came upstairs at the same time. They came upstairs, and then they did their Q&A portion, and so they were asking questions in the audience, and I'm like, Jonathan, what are you gonna do after this? What's next for you, is my question. As if I didn't know at that point. I was following Broadway World. I was following Broadway.com. Of course I knew he was going to do Death Trap in London. So he said Death Trap in London. And I was like, great. So he answered my question. I was super happy about that. But we ended up staying a long time. And it was starting to get pretty late. We got there at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. We left at like close to 11. It was me and then like maybe 2 other girls. We all go to the same garage and then find out that the garage had closed. Maybe it closed at 10. I don't know. It closed pretty early, which is not really that. If you know Beverly Hills always closes at random times. And so it's not like we were trapped in the garage. All they had were cones at the exit. So we could take, some girl moved the cones, and we had extra set of car keys, my mom's car keys, so we were able to leave. But our car keys, because it was about valet service, were upstairs in the building. The next day, we had to go get the car. I mean, at that point, we had 2 cars, so both of us could drive our cars home. But we still had to go back to the garage to go get the car. And they told us that if that ever happens again, just go upstairs and ask the guard for our keys, because I guess that happens all the time. People park there and don't know what time it closes. Or they could just leave it open and let us leave and everything would have been fine. But whatever. So we ended up getting our car keys and we took 2 cars home and everything was fine. But that was what I would call maybe like the first time that I got my car locked somewhere because of Jonathan Groff. What's fun about this is that there are 2 stories where that happened. So I mean, at that point in my life, it was 2010 and I wasn't doing anything like stage dooring, or I wasn't really comfortable with talking to people still. I just didn't really know what to say, I guess. I always felt like you had to have something to say to get, I mean, I still kind of feel that way, to get something signed or get a photo or whatever. For whatever reason, I wasn't comfortable with it at that point. I mean, fast forward, I've met Jonathan a few times at this point in different circumstances, and it was 2000, not too long ago. It was I don't know why I'm like this. It was 2019. It was D23 Expo, And D23 Expo was held differently. Every year they have this something called an animation panel featuring the animated films that are going to be at Disney, or they have the live action panel, which is going to be Marvel and all the live action series that Disney's going to come out with in the next few years. So they have a couple different panels. Usually live action is separated from animation, but that year in 2019 they decided to combine it. I only say that because in the past, I had only attended the animation panel. It's held in this big giant hall at the Anaheim Convention Center, and you just can wait a few hours, maybe in the afternoon on their, I forgot what day it was, like usually on their Friday, and then you're able to go into the animation panel. Easy peasy. But for live action, it's a more difficult process because everybody wants to get into the live animation panel. So people usually sleep overnight to be able to get into that panel. It's just the number of stars that show up, and really cool things usually happen during those panels. And they don't televise them. They only show like brief clips of what happens. So you don't really get the full picture unless you're actually in the audience. So I'd never been to live animation panel, or I'd never been to live action before because I never slept over at the Anaheim Convention Center. I was like, I'm not going to do that. I don't do that at Comic-Con. I'm not going to do that anywhere else. But then they said that they were combining live action and animation panel. And I thought, oh my God, like I always want to see the animated films. There's something that cool that always happens at animation, and Disney animation is what I'm most interested in. So I said, all right. And you know what? It's August 2019. Frozen 2 is coming out November 2019. Something Frozen 2 is gonna happen. So I sleep over, I spend the night inside the very cold convention center with a lot of new friends. They're blasting full blast Disney movies on the TVs above us, and they don't allow, at that year, they didn't allow sleeping bags. They didn't allow anything that you couldn't just carry on your body. So sleeping bags were out, chairs were out, and inflatable pillows were out. Anything was out. So I was basically sleeping on the ground with my jacket that I just used my backpack as a pillow. So there was that. So the next day, great, it's time for live action animation panel. And at the very end of D23's animation panel, as you saw, or if hopefully you have seen on Frozen 2, the making of on Disney Plus, they all showed up, all 4 lead characters showed up to sing Some Things Never Change at the end of the animation panel. And I lost my ever-loving stuff. Like, I think my mom said that it was like, you know, how many times have you met Jonathan? How many times have you seen Jonathan? I don't care. As long as he like pops up somewhere unexpectedly, I'm going to be excited. So I always say I spent the night just to see Jonathan Groff singing Some Things Never Change, which is actually true because it was like the thing that I was most excited for and the thing that I was hoping for the most. Like, I love Marvel. I love being part of the Disney animation panel, but I was just really excited to see him singing songs at the end of that panel, and it happened. So yay! It was absolutely worth spending the night in a very cold convention center. So the only reason I wanted to do live action panel and animation was the hopes that Jonathan Groff will be there singing in my face, and it fucking happened. That's what you do when you like are determined and you need to do something and it happens. Good things will happen. Like I said, that wasn't the only time that my car was trapped somewhere when I was seeing Jonathan Groff. The last time that happened was 2017. Again, another year for D23 Expo in Anaheim. Also the year that I went to Comic-Con. So I did back-to-back Comic-Con, D23. Other way around. I did back-to-back D23 and then Comic-Con. And then the day that I drove home from Comic-Con, I went back home, I changed my clothes, and I jumped back into my car to go to the Hollywood Bowl because it was Sondheim on Sondheim, starring Jonathan Groff, Jesse Tyler Ferguson, Ruthie Ann Miles, Claiborne Elder, who else was there? Tons and tons of people. I was running on probably pure adrenaline at that point. My 2 hours plus of driving home from San Diego and then going straight to the Hollywood Bowl to meet up with my friend Lisa. So we were sitting, it was a fantastic show. As you know, I have most of those videos on my channel. After the show, I was like, I should do Stage Door because I didn't have my Here Lies Love window card signed by Ruthie yet. I brought her the Here Lies Love playbill when I went to see her in King and I, but I didn't have my window card signed. So I said, I'm going to Stage Door. It should be fine. It should just take a minute. I mean, they usually exit the show afterward and then go to the party, which is what I told my friend Lisa. So we did that, and then some people did come out and sign right away, but the stragglers were, of course, other people. So we were just kind of waiting out there for a little while, and then Lisa was like, you have a certain time when you're at the Hollywood Bowl to get back to your car if you took the buses there. I usually parked at LA Zoo because it was close to my house. So I'd park at LA Zoo, I'd go on the bus takes you up to the Hollywood Bowl. It's easier than parking at the Hollywood Bowl, which if you park there, it's a nightmare. So we parked in the buses, or we parked in that parking lot together, me and Lisa. But it was getting pretty late, and the buses tell you to be there 30 minutes after the show ends. And I guess I never knew what would happen if you left before that. So I just stayed. I stayed at the Hollywood Bowl Stage Door, and Lisa was like, I gotta go, like the bus is gonna leave. And I said, okay, bye. Come to find out, the bus really does leave you a half an hour after the show ends, which is something I found out later. So in the end, at this particular Stage Door situation, which has never really happened to me, we were like the last people standing. It was just me and a bunch of other girls, and I think there were only maybe 8 of us, and one really young girl whose mother was very insistent on taking her home, which I thought was adorable because that would be my mom. If I was a teenager, she'd be like, let's go. But it was only a few years ago for me, so I was definitely over 30. So, but at that point, you've been waiting for that long, just stick it out. Just stick it out. What's the worst that could happen? And the security guard was still there, and they were incredibly nice to us. I mean, security didn't have to be that nice, but they were reassuring the mom and reassuring the girl, the party's ending, the party is almost over, so Jonathan's coming down. She really wanted her thing signed. And there were a bunch of girls there also with Spring Awakening playbills and just Jonathan related stuff. I had brought my looking posters for him to sign because mine have gone unsigned. And it's one of the last things I have for him to sign of his. So I brought my looking posters. Also that night I ran into Michael Lannon, who was the creator of that show, begging for another one. So we were all kind of at the barricade, and then Jonathan comes down, and then he goes, people were calling him over because he was gonna get into his car at that point. It was that long. It was at least 2.5 hours after the show had ended, so it was pretty late. I'm amazed they let us stay that late. So they shouted his name, and he came over, and he was like, have you guys been waiting here the whole time? And yep, sure was. Sure, we were sure doing that, waiting the whole time. So he was like, if I had known there were people down here, I would have come down so much sooner. And we were like, I guess it's fine. He's starring in the show, of course it's fine. But I don't know, I think at that point it was either it was not going to happen or it was going to happen, and you just wait it out to see what happens. I mean, at that point it was so late, and at that point I was delusional after coming back from Comic-Con and then doing this the whole night. And so you know, he's very kind and he signed everybody's stuff. He did basically whatever anybody asked him to do, which is, if you ask anybody, it's very Jonathan Groff. But so after the show, I ended up becoming friends with a couple of the girls there. We were all, I guess, the adults of the group. So they were very nice, and one of them drove me back to the zoo parking lot, where I saw that my car was the only car that was impounded in the zoo parking lot. Like, there was a metal chain that was attached to the only exits there. So there was no exiting that zoo. I couldn't jump back in my car and, like, go get my car and then go home. Thankfully, I lived very close to the zoo at that time. I was only 5 minutes away, so that girl was very nice, and then she brought me home in front of my apartment so I can go home. But that was the second time already that, because of Jonathan Groff, my car was locked in somewhere where I couldn't just go get it. I mean, the first time there were cones so we can, like, get in the car and leave, but this time it was locked in. When those buses say they're gonna leave half an hour before or after the show ends, they really do leave half an hour, Lisa told me. So she didn't stick it out, which was fun. I cannot even blame her, but you know what? 2.5 hours is just an endurance game. It's a game of wills. It's a game of, hey, I've been waiting here this long. I can stand to wait a little bit longer. And it was fun, you know, when you're hanging out at that time and it's so late and you have that one thing in common. It's like, it ended up being a fun thing. So it was a fun night. Groff, the things that I have done for you. Which is fine. He's one of my favorites, so it's fine. But I just thought it was funny that, upon reflection, that I've gotten my car locked twice now in parking situations, and I've slept on the ground to see him specifically when I have met him previously and seen him in other things. But yeah. If you like this video, please like and subscribe and click the notification bell so that you get notified when I have another one of these. There are stories upon stories, and I'm going to leave you with this clip of me at the Looking Paley event that happened February 2015. The reason I remember that is because the day after I was leaving to go to Florida for my 30th birthday Disney extravaganza, I went on a Disney cruise and I went to the parks, so I should have been packing, but Jonathan was somewhere, so I didn't go pack. I did this instead. So here's a clip of the Looking panel in which I started talking about The Comeback, which is one of my favorite shows, and made them all laugh. And that brings much joy to my life that it was captured on film.
It's so uncomfortable.
I know.
Like, it's so painful and, like, awful, and you want to hit him and throw things at him, but you feel so sad for him at the same time, and that's, like, a pretty incredible thing.